Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Christina and I am a genre bending literary writer. And today I'm going to take on a topic that I recently became aware of. I was watching YouTube and I kind of am more on the author-tube side of YouTube, but I do watch a few booktubers and I started to see this story about Luke Bateman and his book deal that he got. And I had never heard of this guy. I'm not on TikTok. I had no clue who he was, but I wanted to kind of weigh in as someone who's on the author side and just talk a little bit about my thoughts on the whole situation. So, if you're interested, stick around, hit the like, hit the subscribe. I would appreciate it. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. So, without further ado, let's talk about it. So, from what I could tell, Luke Bateman is an Australian minor celebrity. He was on the Australian version of The Bachelor, I think. But more importantly, he started a booktok account in April, and it was announced either this past week or the week before that he had a 2-book deal and he has no manuscript. So basically, he got a deal before he ever wrote a book. And a lot of people are upset about that, and reasonably so. He is a white guy who didn't write a book and got a book deal. And there are people who are in marginalized communities that have written multiple books and they don't have book deals. Now, I don't know whether he's had any writing experience. I don't know if he has taken writing courses or maybe he had some kind of synopsis. I did read the publishing announcement, and apparently it's he's going to write a fantasy book, like Brandon Sanderson type fantasy. And I don't know if he maybe pitched a synopsis, maybe he's working with someone to figure out a book. I have no clue. It was just a really short thing. But I want to break this video into 2 parts. So the first part is I want to talk about why some people are upset. And I understand this. As a writer of color, I have heard stories of people who write good books and they get lesser advances than other writers who are white. Other writers who are female get less advances than their male counterparts. I haven't really experienced that, but that's because I haven't written a book. I haven't written a book since in 20 years ago. Now, I did write a book last year and I'm currently revising it. So we'll see, when I'm ready to send it out on submissions, what happens. But I can say that I remember 20 years ago when I wrote that book, what my experience was like. Now, before I launch into this, my own experience, I want to just say very, very clearly, I am very happy my book was not published. I am very happy. I did find a digital copy in an old thumb drive that I had, and I reread some of it, but I could not reread all of it. It was not good. It should not have been published, and so I have no regrets. But I do remember around this was 2004, maybe 2005, when I was heavy into querying. I wrote my book between 2002 and 2004. And then between 2004 and 2008, I tried to get a literary agent, tried to sell it. I lost count of how many places I sent it to. And I got no traction. No traction. Rejection letter after rejection letter. As I should have, because the book was not good. It was not good. But I do remember hearing, and I'm not sure if it was on Access Hollywood, but maybe it was like one of those celebrity magazines, that Paris Hilton had got $1 million advance for her book. And I was like, how can Paris Hilton get $1 million just for being pretty? And I can't even get a literary agent. I can't even get a poem published. I did not get my first fiction story published until 2014. And, in the mid 2000s, I had a few nonfiction things published, but no fiction. And Paris Hilton's book was like an autobiography, or a memoir. It wasn't a fiction book. But I just remember thinking how unfair it is that there are so many great writers and they're getting $5,000, $10,000. And this celebrity who has never expressed any interest in having any kind of writing career is getting $1 million. And the excuse is always, well, she has a following, she's popular, she will earn back that $1 million and then some, and then we can take that money and we'll invest it in smaller authors. And that was 20 years ago, and they're still kind of saying that. And I don't know. I honestly don't know if that's really the truth of it. Maybe the truth of it is they're just making safe bets, and they think that somebody who has a large following and who has more notoriety is a safer bet than someone who has a smaller audience but is a good writer. I guess we'll see. I do want to note that there are some writers who are starting to get more recognition, who are in more marginalized communities, and they're getting big advances, but they've been working for a really long time. The one I'm thinking of just off the top of my head is Nnedi Okorafor, and her book Death of an Author, I believe, was a 7-figure advance. But she has been around for a really long time. I read Who Fears Death, and I remember she has a Bindi trilogy, or I don't think it's called Bindi trilogy, but it's a trilogy, and the first book is Bindi, and she's been around forever. And she's finally starting to get those big numbers. But, Luke Bateman did not. So I can understand people's frustration with the publishing industry. I think this is more reflective of how people feel about publishing than they feel about Luke. Because honestly, I don't really know if he is a good writer. Maybe he is a fabulous writer. He's the next Brandon Sanderson, the next Dan Simmons. We just don't know. But the way that it went about was like really, really unfair. I mean, he didn't even have a manuscript, and that feels very insulting to those of us who are writing and putting the time and effort into our craft, but we don't have 100,000 people following us on TikTok. I did remember years ago hearing a story about celebrity publishing. I think it was on NPR. So I went and looked it up, and the title of said article from the New York Times is called "Millions of Followers? For book sales, it's unreliable." And that's from December 2021 in the New York Times. It's an interesting read. I recommend it. If I remember, I'll put a link to it as a pinned comment in the video, because it basically talked about how like Billie Eilish had $1 million advance and she didn't earn out, and Justin Timberlake had a big advance and he didn't earn out, and these are people who have millions and millions of people following them, but sometimes that does not translate into book sales, and publishers are still just kind of rolling the dice, even with celebrities with large followings. Now, I hope that Luke Bateman actually does well. I hope his book really does well. I hope it's a good book, to be honest with you, because I think he will bring in more people to reading, and I'm always for more readers, always for more readers. But I also hope that it highlights the inequalities and that people go out of their way to find folks who don't get as much attention and read their books. I'm happy that there's so many people that are passionate about books and they're going to Target and buying them. But there are also some writers who are really great and they do not have that kind of support. The book community is not there for them. Um, and I don't know if it's just the genre is not there, or if it's just they fly under the radar. As an author who tries her best to put her best out there, all I can do really is just continue to do my best and to build upon the work that I've already written, which is why I decided that I was ready to write a book, and I actually finished said book. Now we're in the rewrite phase. But I remember probably like a decade ago, I talked to Alma Katsu, and she said, "You gotta write a book. You gotta write a book." And I just wasn't ready to write a book, and now I feel I am. So I don't know what's gonna happen with it. I hope it does well. I hope I get a literary agent. I hope it gets a book deal. But I also know that I'm in this for the long haul. So if this book doesn't work out, I'm going to write another one and another one and another one and another one. Um, because that's just who I am. This year alone, I've already written a new short story and I rewrote at least one other short story. I still have another one to rewrite, but I'm still writing, and I don't plan on stopping just because I don't get a deal or I don't get published. Those things are wonderful, but it's not what's driving me to create. I don't necessarily write a book because I want a book deal. I write a book because I want to write a book. So now we're going to come to part 2 of this video. And part 2 has more to do with, as a writer, what do you do with that sort of situation when you're in a situation where you're not getting that attention and you're not getting that those opportunities. And I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to say, just suck it up and keep going. I get the need, I get the want. We all, as creators, we all want that. What I will say is there are many different paths to getting your book published. I know quite a few people who have had their books published, and all of them have different stories. Some went with a small press, some were self published, some did it the old fashioned way. They wrote a book, they got a literary agent, they queried a bunch of publishers, and they got published. And some people won contests and leveraged that to get a book deal. There are many different paths to success. Is it unfair that some people who don't have manuscripts are getting book deals? Yeah. Yeah. But I also feel like that shouldn't discourage you thinking that there aren't other opportunities. There are. And you have to almost be persistent. Persistence in writing go hand in hand, like peanut butter and jelly. So you have to kind of just keep believing in your work. It is hard. And I'll say it again, writing is not for the weak. It is really not. You want a writing career? It is not for the weak. Because here's the thing. If your book comes out and it doesn't perform the way that it is supposed to, your next book is going to get even less attention. And your next book after that, if you're lucky to get one, is going to be even less because the sales are not there. And even though you have a large following, people may say to you, okay, you have 100,000 people that follow you, but you sold 5,000 books. So why should we be giving you this big advance? That's one of the challenges of a lot of people who are traditionally published, particularly mid-list authors. They get an advance, they don't earn out the advance. So they write a new book and their advance is even smaller. And if they don't earn out that advance, then their next book is even smaller, to the point where it's just diminishing. And so for some authors, they're seeing their work just fall off. And that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. So the best thing that I can do is tell people, write something that you believe in and you want to promote, but you need to keep writing to keep that momentum going. And it can be tough when your first book is just not doing what people expect it to do. Sometimes it takes the second or the third book before that happens. My nose is itchy, sorry. And so persistence is key, and writing is not for the weak. And there are many different paths to success. Um, I've been watching a few people who have talked about Substack and how they found success there. I also follow quite a few people who are self-published and have learned to be good at marketing and learned to be good at social media, and they are making a living as writers doing those things. So I get it that some people just feel that this is unfair, but I also feel like this is a problem that's been going on for a very long time, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. Publishing is a business. Like I said before, publishing is a business. They're not going to publish you if they don't think they can make money off of you. And the problem is there are so many people who just believe that, you know, non-white or non-male writers are not going to make them money. And sometimes that's just not true. You know, what was the name of that one writer? I'm blanking on her name right now, but she wrote Waiting to Exhale. Terry McMillan, that was it. Terry McMillan. Her first book, um, she had to sell it out of the back of her car at churches because her publisher said, "Well, black people don't read," and she was like, "Are you high? Well, they're definitely reading." And she proved them. I think she sold like 100,000 copies out of the back of her car. I don't really remember though. It's been a minute since I've read that story, so don't quote me on that. But I remember her saying she drove around to black churches and sold her book there, and that proved that she could be a bestseller and was worth the investment. The other story I'm thinking about is, I'm blanking on their name too. This is not the day for me to remember author stories, but there are some people who have defied the odds because they learned to find their audience. That's the whole point I'm trying to say. And you have to go where that support is. And if publishers are too dumb to recognize that you're going to make them money, then go past them and make money for somebody else. You know, even if you have to self-publish yourself. Sometimes you have to do that. I know a lot of people don't like doing that, but sometimes you just have to, prove it. And it's unfair. Again, I've said it before, that's unfair, but sometimes that's what you got to do. So, in conclusion to this video, I want to say that I understand people's frustrations, and I understand that there are people who feel like publishing hasn't changed in the 30 odd years that I've been trying to get published. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon because it is a business. But I also feel like there are many different ways and paths to success. And you really do have to believe in your work, persevere, and, prove the naysayers wrong. I hope you do. If you're a writer, I hope you're sticking with your work. If you believe in it and you're keep going. I understand that it's frustrating, but nobody's forcing you to do this either, you know? So I'm okay with them criticizing the publishing industry. I definitely think that it deserves it. And we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. For me, I think I'm just going to keep working at it. I'm going to keep working on my stories. I'm going to revise my book, and I'm going to take it out there, and we'll see what happens, you know? So thank you so much for watching. I hope this wasn't too much of a scatterbrained video. If you have any thoughts about what I said, go ahead and drop them in the comment section. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all on the next video. Bye.